there's this idea that the more engaged you are, the more you fiddle, tweak, and adjust, the sharper or the more accurate you will be. And what we're actually recommending is the opposite. Welcome to the Rich and Regular podcast, where we explore life at the intersection of money. I'm Julian.
And I'm Kirsten. And today we're talking about how to change your life.
Oh.
Yeah, big promises. We're talking about how to change your life by paying yourself first, and more specifically, by automating the entire process so you don't have to think about it. But first, I want to shout out Beyond the Sun podcast, who left a comment on YouTube on our interview with Jackie. And she says, I admit I was today years old when I learned from your guest that Social Security income is adjusted for inflation. What a relief to know.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that people can find little gems within the episode. And I'm hoping that this is one of those episodes where we just remind people that there is a way to automate your savings so that you don't have to think about it. It doesn't have to be this additional thing that you do on top of your already long list.
Yes, I will also say, we are in the process of planning for episodes and topics that we want to cover for the rest of the year. And so that might actually be one of the things that kind of makes another quick dip, just to kind of remind people that it is out there, maybe inform them around how it works, what they can expect if they or someone they know is hopefully positively affected by that.
Yes. The other reason I wanted to talk about this is because I'm an advisor collective for Kiplinger, which
what does that mean?
I don't know. It's a big title.
Very fancy. You're an advisor collective.
I'm part of the advisor collective for Kiplinger, which is basically a personal finance site. And there's this group of financial experts who contribute to articles and write things for their readers, right? And so a couple of months ago, they asked us what the secret to sticking to your budget long-term is. Like, what are the secrets? Tell us what we need to know. And there were several good answers. There were things like tracking your spending, using an app, mindset work, like aligning your larger goals with your purchases and your priorities and addressing whatever feelings are there that are causing the impulse spending. But my answer started with just forget about trying to create the perfect budget and ensure that you pay yourself first.
Yeah.
And even as I say that, I'm reminded that pay yourself first has become this slogan, right? It's short. It's 3 words. It's like, we're not going back. It's like, it's something that people just say. But if we don't take the time to explain what it means, it leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation, right? It leaves people room to say, well, I can't do that. That's not possible.
Yeah, it's not my favorite for a couple of reasons. One, most people are not entrepreneurs. And so when you say pay yourself first, it I think immediately just does not resonate with them or anything that they do in their lives. Most people don't know what it feels like to pay themselves. They know what it feels like to get paid. So I think that's part of the problem. But the other thing is that it's a very scary thing, right? Even after you decode it and you understand what it means through the context of being an employee, which the vast majority of people are, I think it's still scary. There's a lot of emotional issues that go along with that. And I think it's counterintuitive. This is the last thing I'll say. This is my final thought. This is going to be the shortest episode ever. But no, it's very counterintuitive, I think, because it requires you to get out of the way a little bit. And I think what most people think of when it comes to like being financially responsible and making good decisions is really being in the trenches, having the discipline and the wherewithal, the know-how, the know-who, all the tools, all the gadgets, attending all the meetings and webinars, right? Like there's this idea that the more engaged you are, the more you fiddle, tweak, and adjust, the sharper or the more accurate you will be. And what we're actually recommending is the opposite, right?
Yes.
And we've spoken about this from an investing standpoint. We certainly talk about it in our class, Making Money Grow. But a lot of this has to do with you kind of admitting the shortcomings of your own tendencies and all of the variables, the things that you can't control. And so the best thing that the vast majority of us can do is to simplify that process, remove all of those things, and just kind of trust that history, as it has for hundreds of years, will repeat itself. And I think it's one of the most effective ways to kind of get ahead.
Yeah, I think it's the abs are made in the kitchen of slogans. You ever heard that? Abs are made in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that one. I like that. I
Well,
get it.
that's the same situation where it's counterintuitive based on how you were programmed. If you were programmed that abs are made through sit-ups and
Yeah.
versus like fat loss, you need
Yes.
to lose the fat
Oh,
that
you're
is
not.
surrounding your ab. You
Yeah.
already have abdominal muscles. But
Hmm.
that's very hard to explain to someone who is up against a fitness industry that creates commercials that say the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And I also think you're right about the pay. Pay is a really powerful verb.
Yeah.
We pay our bills, we pay our taxes, we pay our dues, and we do all of these non-negotiable transactions because we have to, because we're obligated to do it. And so if you frame it as this act of payment, it elevates the importance, but it also is really unfamiliar because of the words that come after it.
Yeah.
Like you really have to think about it as a bill that you owe yourself. It's as critical as
If that
rent.
helps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if that helps, right? Because sometimes that just adds
Now,
another
if it's
layer
a
of
bill,
pressure.
then I don't want to deal with it at all. I'm very good at ignoring bills that come in, right? So yeah, if that's what it takes, sure,
Yeah.
like treat it like a bill. You know, because you as you were talking, first of all, it took a lot of work for me to like not think about the fitness industry just now. Because when you said that, I immediately went into, I remember these old ab rollers.
Oh
And
yeah,
it used to be on the floor. You used to have to put your arms up, and I haven't seen one of those in a really, really long
the
time.
rollers, they still make them.
Well,
They're less
I
wobbly
know the
now.
rollers. I know they had the one with the wheel and the handles. And
Yeah.
anyway, like my mind went there. I was like, wow, because it just reminded me that you're right. There have always been these tools, and there's always a new tool, like some other way to be more actively engaged.
Yes.
Yet people completely miss the thing that is actually most important, which is like diet and nutrition.
Yeah.
You don't get to just eat what you want, work out as much as you want, and get kind of the results. There will certainly be a few examples, but for the vast majority of people, like you need both. And that big part that you're ignoring is actually the most important thing.
I think the other thing is that a lot of us grew up with a save whatever's left model. Like, were you
Sure.
told to pay yourself first, or were you told first you pay your tithes, then you pay your house, and then you save? Like, how were you instructed on how to save?
No, I wasn't instructed on how to save. I was instructed in tithing. And that's probably the better and sharpest example of the practice that we are recommending here, which is to whatever amount of money you get, however frequently you get it, the first thing you do is tithe. And so I would say that's likely the best example if you grew up in a Christian household of what we're actually recommending here, except we're not just saying tithing. We're talking about preparing and saving and investing and getting rid of debt and doing those kinds of things. That's really, I think, the essence of what we're trying to communicate here. And example or metaphor aside, is really a matter of just reprioritization. It's a matter of saying, I have X amount of money coming in. I have all of these wants and needs. We're not going to get into the percentage of what's, how that's all added up. But I've got all of these things here. And what we're recommending and really advising that a lot of people do is really treat that future self as a top priority. And that's the hard part, because most people think, well, the top priority is what I need to get done today. Like I have to get to next week, to next month. I can't think about 10 years, 20 or 30, 40 years down the line. And I think this is true for a lot of people, but I think this is also part of the reason why, in its own way, why what we're recommending is so important. Because what happens far too often is that people get to the end, they get to this 20, 30 year, they're middle of their careers or towards the end of their careers, whether they decided to end it or it was decided that it was over. And now they realize that they never quite got a chance to catch up. And you can't make up for that. You can't earn that money back because you're now older. Your life and lifestyle and situations completely changed. And so what we're really recommending here is like, how do we find a middle ground here? Or what is the path to accomplish those goals without disregarding all of the short-term or more immediate needs? And I think the biggest thing here is creating a system that automatically does it, because you will always find a reason or a rationale to not make that decision. Like the human brain is just wired that way. But even if you have just the best discipline in the world, the moment you wake up, you are going to be bombarded with distractions and temptations that are going to make you think differently about whether or not you should still be focused on this 20, 30, 40 year goal that's further down the line. And I think this is where automation comes in. Like if you have a system that is automatically taking money off the top, you don't even give yourself a chance to think about whether or not you should still do it or whether or not you should make the deposit or make the contribution or continue to pay off the debt. If I were to use an example, I haven't used a food example in a while, I would say it's really similar to like meal prep. I remember back in the day, now I just meal prep all the time. Like my life is pretty much just meal prep, baseball, and the podcast. But you know, if we were meal prepping, right, and you get into a groove and you know exactly what you're going to do on Sunday, you're going to make all these meals that you know last you for the week, and you've got everything already lined up. But then Wednesday, you get that phone call that a friend's in town and, hey man, would love to meet up. If meal prepping, aside from just like the nutritional benefits, is one of the things that you're doing to keep those costs down, that's a very real decision. We get faced with those decisions all the time. Oh, I actually made dinner. Like, what do I do? Like, do I scrap that, which means I likely end up wasting the money that I've already spent and the time that I already spent meal prepping? Do I just go out with my friend? Do I find this hybrid? Do I eat before I go? Like, what do we do? Right. And I think that the goal here is, and I think a lot of people have been here, is you have options. You can say, you know what? Actually, it's cool. This works out. I can afford to go out with my friend and this isn't going to set me back that much. I'm going to stick to my budget, but also I have this meal and maybe I freeze it. Or maybe, you know what, that becomes a snack. Or maybe you've got a kid and you can kind of repurpose that thing. But the goal is, because you've had the system, because you had gotten into the routine of meal prepping to begin with, you at least have that as an option. When you don't have that as an option, this is where things start to kind of spiral a little bit. And then you go out and you realize not only have you not meal prepped, but you just spent like a week's worth of money out with your friend on that extra night. And sure, it was worth it. Sure, you got to caught up in all those things, but like you're almost like 2 weeks or two steps back because of it.
Yeah.
And that's a very real, like minor example, but I think a lot of people live that way. And
Yeah.
it just compounds over and over and over again. And it's part of the reason, one of the contributing factors as to why they just never seem to kind of like find a rhythm or a groove, or they can't keep a groove for a really long period of time.
Yeah, the options is the most important part, right? Because people think that when you are saving or investing for long periods of time, that your money is locked up. It locks you into something.
Yeah.
Even when you were talking about timelines, 20 years, 30 years, the reality is when something comes up, you want to have options for how you handle it.
Yeah.
You want to be able to dip into your savings for an unexpected expense, or maybe leave your savings untouched and find another solution, or maybe pull some from an investment account and find a way to cover the rest. If you haven't automated savings anywhere or investing anywhere, you lose some of that optionality.
Yeah.
James Clear actually wrote a book called Atomic Habits, which has sold like a gazillion copies. And that's basically his entire shtick now, which is that atomic habits are these regular practices that start small, but they are incredibly powerful because they compound.
Yeah.
And paying yourself is one of those things that fits the bill. It can be as small as you want. We're not saying it has to be $100 every time you get paid, but with technology that automates it with absolutely no willpower, no motivation, it becomes a compounding habit because of where your money goes.
Yeah.
The more money you save, the more interest you earn. The more interest you earn, the more likely you are to start to like saving, because now you've got proof that this thing actually works.
Yeah.
It's really hard to convince someone how interest works if they don't have any money in the system or any dog in the fight.
Yeah.
It's one of those hard things to explain.
Yeah. You know, you've written a popular book when people don't feel like they need to read the book.
Right.
Because they've heard about it so many times. But you're right. And I'm one of those people. Like, I've actually never read the book. I never took the time to read it or listen to it. But I know so much about it because it has popped up on my timeline and in
Every
other
New
people's
Year's
presentations.
Oh my gosh.
For sure. It shows up on people's resolutions and one of the things that they're trying to do. And it's, you know, I don't want to diminish it, but, you know, it's really about discipline. And I think harnessing that discipline and appreciating it and recognizing the role that discipline plays in us achieving and designing the kind of life that we actually want. And I completely agree with that. Again, I've never read the book, but I have a great appreciation for the role that discipline plays. It's, and I'm at a weird point in my life right now too. Like, I'm not really sure. I think I'm disciplined in some areas of my life, others not so much. But even in the areas where I'm not as disciplined, I can rest on the fact that it's because I have banked so much discipline. So in a way, I can afford to cruise a little bit in certain ways. But yeah, hopefully, maybe I'll read it for New Year's and have a different appreciation for it. But I think when it comes to our financial lives, I mean, for sure, one of the things that I think discipline or atomic habits or whatever it is really affords you, and certainly, paying yourself, getting to the habit of putting your financial life at the forefront of your priorities, is it gives you exactly those options that you're talking about because you've been proactive, right? You are actively trying to eliminate debt. You are going above and beyond. You are ensuring that you are investing in your retirement accounts, doing all of those things. It just puts you in a greater sense of control, not even from a problem resolution standpoint, but just in general. Like you have it feels like you have two hands on the steering wheel and you have much more clarity around any of the issues, good or bad, and anything in between that happen in your life. I think it also, in addition to just preparing you to absorb those obstacles, those future challenges that oftentimes derail people's lives, the flip side of that is that it also makes you appreciate the opportunity to thoroughly explore an opportunity that might present itself. So I think back to when I was in college and the idea of studying abroad was presented to me. My very first thought when I opened that pamphlet and I saw how much money it would cost was like, it's not a possibility. Like, I don't have the money. It's not a thing. And completely disregarded it. Like, I've heard about this. This is not me. Thank you for giving this to me, but I'm not sitting around with a couple extra $1,000. And I remember overcoming that obstacle and then ending up getting more money than I actually needed through scholarships. Now, it's just different in a way, but the point that I'm making is that when you have the money and an opportunity like travel presents itself, or an opportunity like a business opportunity, an investing opportunity, you have the option and you have the privilege of actually, now you can read that pamphlet. Now you can thoroughly explore it. You may still ultimately decide that you don't want to do it. Now is not the good time, or this isn't the kind of investment or thing that you want to do, or that you're interested in spending your money on. But it at least gives you an opportunity to say, wow, this time I actually had the thought and the wherewithal to read it and to explore it. And I think what you learn from that is such a great level of appreciation for that discipline and the work that you put in to get to that point, even though you didn't get a chance to do it.
But you get to learn
you didn't disregard it.
Yeah. You get to learn what it feels like to decide.
Yes.
To decide versus to
have the decision forced on you because you don't have the money.
Exactly.
Right. And that, I think, is a thing that when you reach that point, it's one of those unspoken milestones in your financial life. Like everyone talks about, whether it's the mortgage or paying off the big bill or maxing out the 401k, but sometimes it's those intangible, kind of subtle milestones where it's like, yeah, well, this time I was actually very clear on what I wanted to do. I understood why I did it or why I didn't do it. And that in and of itself becomes one of the most important aspects of your financial life, one of the biggest memories.
All right, so let's talk about some methods, hopefully in order of ease. We're going to start with the easiest first, which is roundup apps. Now, our favorite one is Acorns, and I will leave a link in the bio or in the podcast description, depending on where you're listening or watching to this. But our favorite one is Acorns, and how they work is every time you spend money, it's going to round it up to the next dollar, and that difference is going to be invested or saved on your behalf. You get to pick. And what it does is it turns spending into saving. You don't have to do anything extra. It makes saving feel effortless, makes it feel a little fun. It's just every time you swipe, it's just going to be rounded. And it's actually easier to manage a budget because all you've got is whole numbers. Like, if you spent $5.63, it's really $6.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's truly likely the most passive way of saving and investing. And it's such a great surprise kind of feeling. It's one of those things where, you want to be able to just look up. And I know when people say that, right? Like, I know I'm not the only one. My mom used to say it when I was a kid, but like, oh, you look up one day and then all of a sudden you've got, it's like a blessing. It's like, it's like you accidentally threw a couple fruit seeds in the backyard 10 years ago and you hadn't been there. And then you get back and it's like, oh my gosh.
It's like finding money in your pocket
It's
doing
like
laundry.
finding a lot of money in your pocket.
I think one of the best things about Acorns is that they actually have the proof that this works, that this builds habits. They shared a spreadsheet with Axios, which is a news company, that showed what happened to the money invested of this cohort of Acorns customers who had accounts in 2015 and whose accounts were still open in March of 2024.
Okay.
Now, in total, what they've shown is that customers contributed $270 million in roundups. So that's just rounding up purchases that they're making on everyday items. And then they contributed another $543 million in scheduled deposits. So on top of customers using this for roundups, it also built that habit and they started to schedule deposits on top of the money that they were rounding up. This is what savings does. It builds good habits. Now, of course, some of these customers have had to withdraw some of that savings from 2015 to 2024. But by February 2024, they collectively still had $426 million in savings, like almost $500 million in savings, all from these small everyday items. And it's like, if more people could just take advantage of technology that makes life easier, if we could just get over the hump of getting started or signing up or just clicking to learn more about it and making a decision that it's either for you or not for you, then we could see some of this progress in our own lives.
Yeah. And, you know, the way I think about that is, you know, we all want that. You all want to be able to look back to see the coins that are left in your back pocket and like in the back seat of the car underneath the mats, like that doesn't grow.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so if you had a quarter that you were missing a year ago or $1 that you were missing, you're not going to find it in your shorts or your pants and all of a sudden it turned into $3.50. You know what I mean? Like that,
270 million.
It's certainly not 270 million, right? And so, yeah, I think to your point, like this is one of those things that highlights just how important it is to create a system that does all of those things for you. And thankfully, Acorns is one of those tools that really kind of simplifies that entire process. But I also think it highlights that the little things do matter as well, that it's not just the big things. And I know we spend a lot of time talking about the big things, but you really need a combination of both. You know, like there's some things, I'm going to use another food metaphor, but you don't need a bunch of bay leaves. You know, in your soup, you're not going to dump like 10 bay leaves into your soup, but you can kind of tell the difference for just like one or two, like, cause it is surprisingly like a pretty powerful kind of aromatic herb.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't the best thing. Maybe people don't even use bay leaves like that. But my point is you need the big things. You need the primary ingredients that's going to dominate it all, but you also need just little things along the way that I think oftentimes lead you to a much better long-term result.
Yeah, it's like the cilantro in Chipotle rice.
No, there's a lot of cilantro in it. There's a
That's
lot
the goal.
of cilantro.
All right. The second way to automate your savings or investing is to set it and forget it or set up automatic transfers. I think Tiffany Aliche, Budgetnista, calls this split it and forget it because you can do this at the paycheck level.
She says forget
it.
Oh,
I don't know. She has a really cute way of saying it. I think it's split it and forget it. Because as soon as she said it, I was like, that's clever. But basically, it's because you can do this at the paycheck level. And a lot of us do. If you're enrolled in retirement contributions that come off the top, then you are already splitting it and forgetting it. If you set up automatic deposits to your high yield savings account or even to your regular savings account from paychecks, this is the way that you do this. The government does that. You don't get to opt out of them taking your taxes from your paycheck. I mean, you can, but they're going to collect it either way. But for the most part, that stuff comes off the top. So basically, you would just set it up within your employer system, wherever you do your direct deposit, and tell your money where you want it to go. Now, the other way you can do this, if you don't want it off the top, maybe your checks aren't the same every month or your expenses aren't the same every month. Off the top doesn't work for everybody. You can also do this manually with your bank. So this is what we do. And the benefits of a scheduled transfer is that it creates this consistency and removes the emotional aspect of saving.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who has inconsistent income or inconsistent expenses, start small and just adjust as needed. Remember, you're not locking this money away forever. It's still yours if you need it. And then create multiple savings buckets. You might have one for the emergency fund. You might have one for debt payoff acceleration. You might have one for future goals like vacations or down payments. Some banks will allow you to do this natively on their platform. Some even offer specific goal setting and tracking. We've worked with both Ally and Spruce who offer services like that. But if it doesn't, like if you're just at a regular old standard bank or credit union, then you can create a visual tracker. I just think it's really important to see how much progress that you're making because it's easy for it to feel abstract.
Yeah.
Like I know every first of the month, we're contributing a little something to the HSA. We're contributing a little something to Bose 529. We're obviously paying our mortgage and all that jazz, but it's just a little something. And if there's ever a situation where I need that to come out on the 10th or the 15th, I can just go in and move it.
Right.
But I don't have to think about it every month. I'm only thinking about months where it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, you mentioned, but I'll elaborate a little bit. You can also do this with debt. This is not just for investing. So if you are in the process or in the beginning stages of wanting to automate your debt, or I found that if you are kind of reaching this level where you started out and you've done it automatically and you really have built that habit, you can graduate to kind of automating this process. And I would say even beyond that, you can then graduate to the next level of adding a little bit extra, right? So it's a combination of, well, I know that I'm going to get this automatic payment that goes to it because I've scheduled it and I've already budgeted out exactly what I'm going to do and I know exactly how long it's going to take for me to go ahead and pay this thing off. But it's certainly helpful that when you have more excess or surplus income coming in, you now have this opportunity to throw a little extra something in there, right? Like you can do that. Like you do not only have one chance, certainly when it comes to giving money to a financial institution, like they're not going to stop you
that you only make one payment a month.
Exactly.
You can make as many payments a month as you want.
Correct.
If you want to make a payment every Friday to chip away at your high interest credit card debt, you can absolutely do that.
Right. And I think that's certainly relevant in those months for those of us, or for those of you rather, who may be in that bi-weekly payment schedule, those couple of months. What is it, September?
I don't know what they are anymore, but you get 3 checks.
You get 3 checks, right? Whatever those months are, you know what it is. And stop looking at it like it's a surprise, like you got paid extra that month. It's the same total amount of money. I'll give you another example here. If you're using the avalanche method to pay down your high interest credit card debt and you have a goal of maybe sending like $600 a month, you can set that bill pay to send $150 a week. You can break it up, right? So that you can get creative, find other ways to do it. Maybe treat that as a bit of like a training wheel exercise to allow you to do the same thing. Whatever works for you, you have that flexibility. When it comes to doing things like paying off your mortgage, this is certainly something that we did back in the 2010s, the late 2010s. You want to pay off that mortgage, right? You can do that once a month, but you can also agree that when that next paycheck comes, you're going to send a little bit more. Just want to make sure a couple of things, because this can be a little tricky. You want to make sure that you are not banking with a company that actually will give you like a prepayment or an additional payment fee. If you do that, just make sure that you're like doing the math and make sure that it still kind of makes sense for you. And yes, that is still unfortunately a thing. I think it's like an administrative fee, but it's BS in my opinion. Like you should not be charging people for paying you the money that they owe you earlier or in a greater frequency than they normally would.
Yeah.
The other thing you want to make sure that you're doing when you do that is that those additional contributions, that additional payment outside of the scheduled payments that you have are going towards the principal. You do not want to make early payments to future interest payments, right? You want to make sure that's going towards shrinking the principal, which then will reduce the total amount of interest that you owe over time. But yeah, you've got the flexibility to do that. And I think automating all of it, by graduating to automating it in a way that just works for you, like all of those things combined, I think just lead to greater results, but without question, greater long-term success, whether you are investing or paying down debt.
Yeah. Now, this third one is one that nobody ever likes. Nobody ever wants to say, ooh, that's a good idea. But it's investing your raises and your windfall money. And the reason why this works is because it's painless savings. You're saving money that you never had. Now, you might have pre-spent it in your mind, but you never actually had it. This is money that is incremental. It's a raise. It's a windfall, unexpected. And the reason that this works is that you can just continue to live on what you were living on before and bank whatever that is.
Yeah.
Now, when we were working in corporate, you could actually schedule incremental increases into your 401k. So you could say, I want to contribute 5%, but I want it to increase 1% every single June or July.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way to do this. Another way to do this is when you get your merit increase and you understand when it's going to hit your first check. Typically, you get like a 2-month window or like a 1 month. You get a heads up. Go ahead and adjust your savings contributions in advance so that by the time that that hits, you're not seeing it. You're not seeing it fully.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to do the whole thing, although it wouldn't hurt. Just, just give yourself a haircut and invest the difference.
Yeah. I was cut from a different cloth. And so I remember taking great pride in those opportunities because I was so disciplined. Whenever I got that merit increase or whenever I got that bonus, like it was already planned. I knew exactly what I was going to do with that. I have never been so fortunate to get a lot of windfalls, like nothing major, little things from there. Maybe it's like an insurance reimbursement, but ain't nobody ever just sent me a couple $1,000s that I wasn't expecting. But we did have a conversation around windfalls, and these things do happen, right? And, we talk about that in detail in terms of all the other examples where this might actually be something that you deal with. If you're interested in that episode, that's episode 154. But I think at least one of the big takeaways from that is to just create a bit of a baseline structure for how you would handle those things. Prepare for a windfall before it actually comes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so whatever that amount is, know that, hey, because I have this financial plan, this is what I know I would do with money if it were to actually happen. You don't have to dream about it or anything like that or write anything down in great detail, but you might be able to say, without question, whatever amount of money I get, 50% of it is going to go towards accelerating a debt payoff. 30% is going to go to maybe pad my savings or get me that much closer to a fully funded emergency fund. And 20% is going to be, I'm just going to splurge. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to make sure that I treat myself a little bit and enjoy the benefit of this actual unexpected amount of money. But I think having that plan, or at least giving it some thought in advance, is really, really key. Because if you don't do that, and we talk about this extensively in our book and certainly on other episodes of the podcast, when you don't do that, that 20% that you are likely saying you're going to splurge on yourself, without question, is going to be closer to 100%. Without question. Because you're going to treat it like, man, this wasn't my money. It was a true surprise, and I've been working hard, and I'm going to do that, right? This is about creating that discipline, making sure that you always have a plan. Always. You may not always follow it 100%, but if you have a plan, something that you've given thought to, you will eventually find yourself in a much better position further along down the line. And I think that is just at the heart of it. That mindset shift of always having a plan. It's not always going to be perfect, but always having a plan and utilizing systems, utilizing this sort of process of whether you want to call it paying yourself first or putting your future first, whatever version of it you want to call it, I think is so critical, I think, to achieving your financial goals.
This last way to automate paying yourself first is also a little counterintuitive, but it's to apply it to your expenses. Because the most beautiful thing about pay yourself first is that it works just as well with the money going out as it does with the money coming in. And so when you take advantage of tools like coupons, price comparison, like we did a whole episode 97, the do's and don'ts of modern couponing. When you take advantage of ways to reduce the cost on items that you buy on a regular basis, that's the equivalent of giving yourself a raise.
Yeah.
You can do it two ways. You can either increase the money coming in or you can decrease the money going out. And there are ways that manufacturers, that different retailers use to incent you to buy from them. And that's coupons, that's price comparisons, that's all kinds of things. And to me, that's what makes this life changing. When you have a financial cushion, you're not just helping yourself. You have the potential to be in a position to help others. You have the potential to take career risks that might benefit your community and to donate to causes that you care about. And so it really does become this compounding life force that goes beyond just your bank account. It really changes it changes the way that you decide to do things or not decide to do things.
Yeah, I would go back to the top of the conversation where my beef with the idea of paying yourself first was something that I thought was more relevant for business owners, entrepreneurs. And I think this is actually one of those cases where it really does present an opportunity, because if you think about running your household and your finances like an entrepreneur, you should always be looking for ways to reduce your expenses. Like, that's not a punishment. That's just a part of being in business. Your goal is to maximize whatever's left, what you consider profit. And I think that's how a lot of people should be managing their finances. And so in opportunities like that, it's almost like looking at some of those expense categories as a level of overhead and trying to find ways to reduce that. And one of the often overlooked little ways is saying is transitioning from a monthly or month to month expense to, your point, a lot of companies will offer you a discount if you transition to just spending the whole thing, or buying it for a full year up front, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of those little things combined can lead to better long-term savings, which can then be reapplied to debt payoff, investing, or partially subsidizing or paying for a vacation or whatever it is that you're looking to enhance in your life. So yeah, these are just the benefits, right? It's a different way. I would say it's slightly advanced, but most people think I just need to earn more money. Then most people think I need to make harsh cuts. But after a while, once you've settled into a rhythm, you start to realize that there are still opportunities to save, but it requires you to think a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And I think this is where adopting these kinds of approaches, the idea of paying yourself first, idea of creating more capacity, both financially, but also just in your mental bandwidth to manage your money in a way, I think oftentimes leads to better results down the line. So hopefully, we're not at the end of the year. You don't have to wait until January to start doing this. Maybe you just tell yourself it's the beginning of Q4 2024. I want to dip my toe in the pay yourself automate world, and, start now. And that way, when you get to January 1st, it's a matter of leveling up instead of starting cold when everybody else is doing the same thing. Like, start now. You don't have to wait.
Exactly. All right, y'all. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the Rich and Regular podcast. Speaking of not waiting, if you like what you heard, let us know by leaving a 5-star review or drop a comment below to keep the conversation going. We will see y'all next week. If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications.